very simple imagery tends to come to mind. Palm trees, beaches, cheap family getaways, maybe even an iguana. See, I went out of my way to ask some people what they thought of Costa Rica.
When you think of Costa Rica, what do you think of?
I think of hot sand,
Like sand and water.
beach balls on the beach,
Sunshine. And anything else? The beach.
walking in the hot sand.
Surfing.
Mm-hmm.
Think of good food, sunsets.
Bees in my hair.
Thank you.
And what's the harm in that? I mean, is there any? But what happens when we neglect the people of Costa Rica? Better yet, what happens when we neglect the culturally specific aspects and ancestry of people within Costa Rica? I mean, I bet you $5 if I asked a singular person if they ever thought of, let's say, Black people in Costa Rica, the answer would be,
no.
So I'm here to unpack just the harm of the neglection of Afro-descendants in Costa Rica. You see, by using the Afro-Costa Rican identity, it is evident that assertion of humanity against the overall social perspective is a valid form of resistance. There are two perspectives that Afro-Costa Rican people, or ACR, have been witnessed from. There's the physical and the metaphysical. When I mean physical, I mean the lived experience on the ground, and when I mean metaphysical, I mean the conceptual overall metaphysics of which these people have been viewed. When one does an initial Google search of the Afro-Costa Rican people, they are viewed as the cultural and flair epicenter of the nation. I want to focus on the individual physical and it may be an overall city view. Despite African American expats saying that there are less instances of racism than compared to that they have experienced in the United States, that is not the same for all of Afro-descendant people in Costa Rica.
Talked about someone who asked me if I have a pet lion and a pet elephant or if we have buildings in Africa, and now I've come to understand that the image they see of Africa is not the best image. They don't know all of this stuff because the only thing they see from UN is this child dying of hunger.
Similar perspectives also goes for the main city in which a lot of the Afro-Costa Rican people live in. The city of Limon, which is a Caribbean-facing coastal city that is home to over 60,000 Afro-descendants, is viewed by a larger society for its unsafe nature.
Two of my friends who are locals from Turrialba, they had never been to Port Limon until we took them there. And they were afraid the whole time because the history of Limon's crime was a serious thing back in the day, and there's still crime there now.
How have these social perspectives that are often forced upon the Afro-Costa Rican people continued on despite offering the nation life and diversity and flair? Well, this is where the metaphysics comes in. Master-slave discourse. As the slave exists to recognize and therefore legitimize the master and his perceived world. The other was a concept coined by Frantz Fanon to conceptualize the existential position of Black individuals. The Black individual is not only Black, but must be Black in opposition to whiteness. But why does this matter? I could easily summarize it by saying to exist for another person is to intrinsically deny yourself of personhood, as you're an object there to validate their subjective perspective. In turn, denying yourself of humanity, restricting your existence to recognize the white man, the oppressor, the colonizer, the master, etc., and not to exist for your own human self. However, I wanted to speak with a professional on this philosophical discourse, in which I turned to a lecturer at the University of Waterloo who has studied and teaches within the subject matter of racial philosophy to better understand the concept of the other and the way it has shaped the Afro population.
In order for us to get a better sense of the political realities that create otherness. And so for me, I'm always drawn to Charles Mills, who teaches us about the political nature of white supremacy and the way that that's operating in the world. So there's often somebody who is considered the norm, and that is the backdrop upon which everybody else is sort of perceived or conceived of or even understood. Mills, because in the racial contract he talks about this agreement that we have to misrepresent the world in order to normalize whiteness and make anything else that is non-white other. Otherness isn't just feeling different, it's political and it's structured. And you are reminded that you are not the person that people are creating these systems for as you navigate everything. It's sort of baked into the experience that you're about to have. And so for somebody like Mills, that idea is that the progress of white supremacy creates an other upon which white folks can actualize themselves. And it doesn't allow us to name it. And so the minute you start to do work like what you're trying to do here, where we're trying to talk about what it is to be other in this world, people will come at you with a whole bunch of different rationales as to why what you are experiencing or what you're trying to talk about is not actually the case. And that's where he talks about something called inverted epistemology, which we don't need to go there.
Since othering denies humanity, it allows for the justification of the negligence in socioeconomic and sociopolitical marginalization, justifying the social perspectives placed upon the Afro-Costa Rican people, allowing for the social perspective and socioeconomic climate of Limon to continue. So to undo some of this cultural and humanity erasure, we must look to the Afro-Costa Rican people for who they are as humans, culturally influential and important to our narrative. So for this, I wanted to experience the Afro-Costa Rican people in the best way I could. I decided to listen to some Afro-Costa Rican music on my way to grab a little snack that I hope resembled their culture. And what I've come to learn is that the Afro-Costa Rican music is often very influenced by Afro-Caribbean music compared to music from Africa. But why is this? We need to look at the history of the Afro-Costa Rican people. The history of the ARC people dates back to 1522, where enslaved Africans had been brought to Central America. Slave trade was limited given the lack of mines, colonial territory battles, and economic inequalities for enslavers. And by the time of the 1824 emancipation, there were only 100 people left in enslavement. The fairly small population continued to dwindle because of interethnic mixing, and it wouldn't be until the year of 1900 to 1913 where there would be a visible increase, as 20,000 Jamaican migrants, often second-generation freed people, entered Costa Rica attracted by the newly established United Fruit Company and the banana plantations. Other migrant workers also came from Panama, Nicaragua, as well as the eastern lowlands of the West Indies. The low number of enslaved Africans and the high number of Afro-Caribbean migrant workers made it so that the Afro-Costa Rican population and culture was influenced by Afro-Caribbean culture, which meant the Afro-Costa Rican music that I had listened to is often recognized as Limon Calypso music.
Rice and beans, qué rico, rice and beans, me gusta, rice and beans, qué sabroso, rice and beans.
Once I had entered my first Latin American grocery store, I was surprised at the lack of Costa Rican items at all. I was hoping to find something that was a part of a traditional Afro-Costa Rican dish, like rondon. Unfortunately, that grocery store only had pasta sauce. Both from Costa Rica. I then went to an African grocery store to see if there was anything else there to help me. Unfortunately, the grocery store only had kielbasa and nothing else, so we left. But of course I did not give up and went to one more Latin American grocery store in my city and found Costa Rican cookies as well as kielbasa chips. Yeah. They're really good. What other cultural influence are there? Well, of course, there is religious cultural influence.
See, life, you come and tell me, mother, for me it is very difficult. Then I can send you happily home. To say. and this is to say, and don't play with vows. You have to learn to keep the vows strictly. Huh? You have to.
As well as there's the presence of the Lebanese Creole.
Your mom is calling you, and in Creole you say you marakali.
In October, where the streets of Le Mans unfold and unravel to a spectacle of colorful celebration through the carnival. ACR people are viewed in society and at large, and we also understand how dangerous this perception is. We also understand that acknowledging people as a collective and their contributions culturally pays homage to their humanity. But just how powerful is this self-assertion? To answer this, we need to take it back to the expert.
Self-assertion is an act of resistance because you're living in a world that doesn't want to see you. Just Black folks expressing joy becomes resistance, because we're living in a world where we aren't meant to be seen. When we assert ourselves, when we ask to be recognized as human, the world around us wants to put us back into this place of invisibility. And so literally just our mere existence becomes a form of resistance.
Self-assertion as a political tool has been utilized by the Afro-Costa Rican people and Afro-Latin American community at large for ages. Identity in Latin America has been set out by white Eurocentric settler ideals, and to take a position outside of their hierarchy claims one's own humanity and pushes against their hegemonic narrative. For their political participation, Costa Rica's VP is an Afro-Costa Rican woman named Epsi Campbell, who has been able to help the nation while also dedicating her time to the prioritization of equity for Afro-Costa Rican peoples. Through her participation in the UN Forum for Peoples of Afro Descent, while also assisting in the Center for Afro-Costa Rican Women that works in connection with the Education Ministry to integrate the National Afro-Costa Rican Studies Commission. All these identities are in place to center the Afro-Costa Rican identity, as well as address the inequalities they experience in Costa Rica. With working with women, indigenous populations through education and finance to address health, living conditions, economic disparities, unequal employment due to racial exclusion, and discriminatory practices that are intersected with gender. Encourage self-identification to gather data, while also making sure to put in culturally specific and nuanced issues at the forefront of what we need to tackle. I tried to get in contact with an organization to interview, but of course none reached out to me. When understanding the validity of self-assertion and the claiming of Black humanity, one may only have to look towards the Afro-Costa Rican people, as their social perspectives in the physical and metaphysical highlight a denial of humanity from a larger system. And to assist them in their claim of personhood, one may not have to look further than their historical path and overall cultural influence that they have provided and exist within. As self-identity has been a political movement strategy that has been utilized from time to allow for political participation in hopes of increasing data and working towards equitable change, as resistance in any capacity is a pillar in our overall fight towards collective liberation.